This week we're kind of doing a deep dive from the deep dive that we already did last week. Last week we had one deep dive on sense making in particular, and then afterwards we had a few lightning presentations by Sean, who's on this call, Mindey and Jamie. And then I followed up, and now we have Jamie and Mindey here today. And Jamie, I'll make you co-host. I just saw you popping in to tell us a little bit about how their projects either make sense of COVID-19, which is Jamie's project with Society Library. She's been mapping COVID-19 argument chains, and she's kind of like given a little bit of a teaser last time, but today we're really hoping to get into the nits and bitty. And then Mindey has this fantastic and super ambitious project called Infinity Project, and he already, and I'm going to share the video in a second, spoke about it a little bit at the last meeting, but he actually proposed, hey, why not take kind of like all the projects that you guys are working on as members of the Hivemind as a kind of like prototype, and let's see if we can get them, if we can get a collaboration graph going of many of the projects that you have. So he'll be introducing the project Infinity, and then maybe sharing a little bit about how we may even use it to get some more collaboration amongst you going. So thank you all for joining. I'm hoping that this is actually actively useful to all of you. And I think given that we have Jamie on the call, perhaps Jamie, you first part on COVID-19 argument mapping, and I'm going to share information about both of you in the chat. Is that okay? You may unmute yourself now, and screen sharing is also totally possible.
Okay. So sorry, you cut out. I've been having difficulty with internet at home. Did you ask me to go first? Because I'm happy to go first.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Okay, great. So hey everyone, I spoke a little bit last week about a nonprofit organization and its projects that I founded. The nonprofit organization is called the Society Library, and the project that we're currently working on is called COVID Convo. So we live in an information age. There's just so much information, and we haven't greatly re-envisioned a lot of institutions in the digital age. So the Society Library is about asking, how can we digitize and innovate upon institutions now that we have the benefit of the internet and technology? So the Society Library is a library of ideas. We have governance and decision-making projects, but before we can ever get to creating a framework for how we can potentially calculate what may be the best decisions to solve problems, we need to begin aggregating what everyone has to say and articulating those problems. And so that first step of the very long vision of the Society Library is these conversation projects. And we specifically call it debate mapping. It's very different than a mind map and a concept map because it's a little bit different than an argument map too, because we are articulating the arguments, but the way that we go about organizing this information ultimately allows for categories and layers of organization. So it's like a concept map and argument map combined, and I'll show you what that looks like. So let me go ahead and just dive right in and share my screen. Okay, so one of the first things that I want to describe is what we do is essentially mine for arguments, claims, and evidence from various forms of media in order to construct databases which house all the argumentation and evidence from all points of view on social and political issues. Now, for the past 2 years, we've been developing methodology to essentially model what could a nationwide or societal scale conversation actually look like. There's lots of debate mapping projects, there's pro-con websites, that's fantastic. But because our very specific design goal was, how can we simulate societal conversation at scale, that implied a completely different methodology and way of going about getting the information so that we could map out that content. While there are websites that ask users to get on their platforms in order to have conversations and have debates collaboratively, because of the actual scope that we are gunning for, our methodology is very different. Instead of getting users to the platform, instead we are collecting what people already have to say on various platforms and then organizing and orchestrating all of that together into one integrated conversation. So I just want to talk about the process. So what I'm about to show you in terms of the debate map makes a little bit of sense. COVID was a topic that we've just recently begun covering. For the past 2 years, we were mapping the debate about climate change. And it always starts with just collecting data. And the type of data we collect is from websites and social media, news articles, television, scholarly articles, YouTube and Vimeo videos. And then we transcribe all of this content into text, and then we begin deriving meaning from them. So once we've transcribed it all to text, and we have automated ways of doing that, we have sentence parsers, and then we have volunteers who clean that up. The next thing we do is we actually start extracting arguments and claims. And so once you start extracting all of these arguments and claims line by line from these videos and scholarly articles and social media, what we notice is that it seems as though the reason why people are making certain arguments is because they're pointing towards what we now call the fundamental question. So the reason why conversations persist is because there's some unresolved issue that people are still kind of talking about, even if they're not addressing that question directly. So yeah, we have tools for that. For climate change in particular, what we noticed was after 2 years of extracting arguments and claims from videos and scholarly articles and social media, we found there was about 220 subtopics of debate. So kind of 220 unresolved issues about climate change that were getting in people's way of making sense of the larger questions. And all of these 220 topics actually fit under 6 different categories of questions. For climate change, it was, what is climate change? Is it occurring? What causes it? What's the impact? What could or should we do about it, which housed all the solutions? And then the 6th question was kind of like a meta debate question, which is, why has this debate existed for so long? And so because of funding issues and a call to action, we recently switched to COVID. And a part of the process after extracting it is, turning those claims into questions and continuously sourcing that content on and on and on, and slowly building what I'll shortly show you as a debate map. Categorizing, like I mentioned, eventually that builds up into a hierarchical structure, which makes it easy to navigate down to the actual datum. And then mapping it, which I'll show you shortly. I'll just skip through. And then publishing that content. Now, the goal of this is to figure out visualizations and build educational tools off of this mapping so that people can begin to make sense of all of these different arguments and claims falling under these different subtopics of debate. And then we receive and repeat that on and on in order to keep the dialogue and the conversation going. So this is COVID Convo. This is not the user interface. We're still developing that, and I'm not quite satisfied with how it looks, so we're not publishing yet. But this is the actual debate mapping interface that we use to input all of our data. Now, with climate change, what we noticed, I think, because it was such an old debate, that it eventually boiled down to 6 fundamental questions. COVID-19 issues are relatively new, they're fast-paced, so there's many more fundamental questions that we've guessed at. I've mocked up this data, and the particular argument chain I'm going to show you I did yesterday. Normally, mapping and inputting into this database is the last step that we would undertake, because normally we just extract so many claims and arguments and do the categorization process before we really begin developing the hierarchy to point to those fundamental questions. But just to show a demo of what it is that we're working on, this is the debate mapping product. I'm going to start with this question of many questions, which is, when should we relax COVID-19 restrictions? And I have no idea if this is cute or not, but I put together a little faux bot that'll help walk us through.
Hello, and welcome to COVID Convo. My name is Sage, and I'm your librarian robot thing. Let's kick off the conversation by asking a question.
Now, as you're going to see, this is going to get pretty complex fast. So the idea of creating different visual assets and video assets to help people kind of make sense and remind them of where they're going in the process is something that are features that we think will contribute to the sense making of all this. So when we start with the question, when should we relax COVID-19 restrictions? We immediately notice, let me tuck that away for now. We immediately notice that this is a pretty generalized question.
Great question. When should we relax COVID-19 restrictions? Well, let's first be a little bit more specific about what we mean when we say we. Do we mean when should government officials relax the restrictions? When should citizens stop abiding by the restrictions? Or when should essential and non-essential businesses stop implementing the restrictions? Tell me.
So normally how the hierarchy of a debate map is created is we have these fundamental questions, and then we have elements of refinement. So for example, asking this generalized question, it can be made more specific when we're talking about, well, who do we mean by we? Eventually, we get to what we call positions. So let's just go ahead and select when should government officials relax COVID-19 restrictions. Now, by opening that up, we now need to refine further of what we mean by restrictions. There's shelter in place. When should businesses be allowed to open back up? When should we relax social distancing enforcement? And when should government officials end mandatory mask and facial protection requirements? So you can see that there's already starting to open up all of these different lanes through which people can explore. And once we fully articulated all of the argumentation, taking people on a tour of these things is the ultimate goal to help people make sense of it, because otherwise we don't expect people to really get lost in this map, no matter how sharp and sleek the eventual front-end UI actually is. So when we ask the question, when should government officials end mandatory mask and facial protection requirements? We have three different positions. So now that we've gone through 3 layers of refinement of the question, there's 3 different positions that we found, which is they should never end mandatory mask and facial protection requirements. They should be relaxed in certain areas when certain safety criteria are met. And then government officials should end mandatory mask and facial protection requirements everywhere immediately. So let's just go ahead and follow down that path. So here's a number of different points of view that support this particular position. We would call these categories. They are essentially containers for more specific arguments that we'll get to. We have here a sentiment, people argue that they don't have the right. It's ineffective. It's more dangerous to wear a mask than not. It's helping train surveillance technologies. We don't need masks or facial protection because other methods are more effective. And we're just going to follow this one, which is because COVID-19 is not as deadly as it was originally reported to be. And so I put a little example here of what we call a logical proof. So we need to ask ourselves, well, how does this make sense between, government officials should end mandatory mask and facial protection requirements everywhere immediately because COVID-19 is not as deadly as it was originally reported to be. So a logical proof is where we actually step by step articulate the reasoning which connects these 2 claims. And so what we have here is the logical proof being, government officials issued mandatory mask and facial protection orders to slow the spread of COVID-19. They wanted to stop the spread of COVID-19 because it was thought to have a high mortality rate, specifically multiple times higher than the common flu. Because the mortality rate of COVID-19 was so high, it was these government officials' duty to protect public health. An effective way to do so was through these mandatory mask and facial protection orders. However, COVID-19 does not have as high a mortality rate than originally thought. Specifically, it is not multiple times higher than the common flu. Therefore, government officials should immediately reverse their decision to require masks and or facial protection because they were wrong in their assumption about how deadly COVID-19 is. Now, I just want to stop here for a moment and talk a little bit about this tool. Now, this debate mapping tool is actually pretty sophisticated, and I'm trying to keep it as simple as possible. But what's really important here, whenever you're dealing with argumentation and logic, is the language is extremely important. So for this, for example, because COVID-19 is not as deadly as it was originally reported to be, there's several elements to that claim that can be picked apart. Like, what does it mean when we say as deadly? And do we have a timestamp on what it means when we say as originally reported to be? And so we have these little containers here where we can add that additional information. Now, if we were extremely precise in articulating these claims and arguments, it would be so unbelievably difficult to read. So what we actually do is we pack different versions of claims into each one of these nodes. So there's a more precise phrasing you'll see right precise here, it actually should be reversed, but precise, because COVID-19 is not as deadly as it originally reported to be, these government officials, when these government officials made the decision to implement these requirements, and then more technically, we're talking about as high of a mortality rate when first reported. Now, we still have to define what those rates actually were and when this was reported versus the decisions that were made state by state, locality by locality. So all of this can get packed away into this tool, but there's several different audiences that we're looking to serve. So this more generalist, vague, although articulated proofs are available, version is what I'm walking through now, but this tool is extremely sophisticated in what we're able to pack into, and different features of the front end, including refresh phrases, specificity sliders, so you can switch to technical jargon, or you can view the most technically precise and technically correct articulations of claims is an option, but at the same time, we want it to be useful for people of different cognitive attentions. So let's go ahead and explore this particular logical proof. this is what we call, this is actually breaking it up into a multi-premise argument. So all of these claims establish the reasoning which justify this conclusion, which is essentially a sum of these things here. Now let's take a look at this particular claim. However, COVID-19 does not have as high of a mortality rate than originally thought. Specifically, it is not multiple times higher than the common flu. Now, if it's not already obvious, there's so many different directions that we could have traveled down. And I'm just taking through a very specific thread just to demonstrate the tool. So in arguing that, people can say it does have a mortality rate similar to that of the common flu. There will be different mortality rates because the likelihood to kill people depends largely on pre-existing conditions. People will make argue mortality rate cannot be determined. It has not been determined. It'll keep changing. Just because it doesn't have a mortality rate as high as originally thought, it doesn't mean it's not a good idea to wear a mask and or facial covering. Somewhere packed in here as well. There's going to be lots of redundancy of like arguments connecting with other arguments and certain claims being relevant at certain other areas of the map. And the cool thing about this tool is we can just copy and paste. And so we can create that kind of recursive argumentation where one claim, once it's logged, can be relevant to a different claim. So I know there was claims packed in here about how contagious it is as a factor in terms of how deadly it should be considered to be. But let's just go ahead and follow COVID-19 as a mortality rate similar to that of the common flu. You can see that we can argue both the truth and relevance. Oh, here it is. Yeah. COVID-19 is more contagious than the flu. So even if it has the same mortality rate, it can kill more people because it can infect more people. So in support of this particular claim, arguing that it's true, someone might cite that there are several seroprevalence studies that show that COVID-19 has a mortality rate similar to the common flu. Now, I haven't input this because I just sketched out this little argument chain yesterday, but we can also pack definitions so we can clarify what seroprevalence means, other technical terms, and make generalized versions of each one of these claims. So in arguing that that's true, we can talk about a specific one. A seroprevalence study led by Stanford researchers concluded that COVID-19 has a similar mortality rate as the common flu. So let's unpack that a little bit because some of you may be familiar with what is referred to as the Stanford seroprevalence study. Some of you may not. It was a little bit controversial, and people argued about, whether or not the study was flawed, whether the researchers who had executed the study had a particular political agenda, whether the testing equipment was accurate enough. So let's just follow this one in arguing against it being true. So we have this red little line here. The seroprevalence study was flawed, and the results should not be trusted. Now there's two different arguments meant to support this particular claim here, and let's follow this one. We've got the assumptions made about the testing equipment could have biased the results. And then there's also the way they recruited their study participants could have biased the results. So let's unpack that one. And so here we have, in brackets, is identified as technical. There was a sampling bias in that the participants self-selected. Other arguments in support of the claim that the way they recruited study participants could have biased the results is that the recruitment link to sign up for the study was shared on social media. Therefore, the people who participated in the study may have been a non-random bias sample. And then also, the recruitment link to sign up for the study may have been shared with family members, potentially biasing the sample. Now, I believe I packed another logical proof in here. Like I showed before, like actually taking the time to establish the reasoning, which actually connects two claims together, may be a little bit overwhelming and unnecessary to read because human beings bring so much context and assumptions and understanding when they're having conversation. It's just important to be there as a feature. And I'm running out of time. Let me race over here. We'll follow this one. The recruitment link to sign up for the study could have been shared with family members, potentially biasing the sample. How that could potentially be relevant is if an entire household was exposed to COVID-19, the likelihood that they would have all been exposed and therefore have developed antibodies if they all participated in the study, then that would have been a group of people who could have, skewed the representation of people who were exposed, and it was not as random as it could have been. And so we actually followed in support of this, one of the researchers, Salil Shah, confirmed that if the recruitment link was shared in person with family members, it could have biased the study. And then now we've actually gotten towards the end of the argument chain, where we have a little bit of evidence. This is a screenshot of that conversation on Twitter. We originally found it on Medium. Here's the screenshot, but then you can also go on the Internet Archive, where we archive things. But here's the problem. Normally, we wouldn't post this argument chain until we've completed the research. So what's left to do in this particular argument chain is confirm that this study researcher, this is his research account, his Twitter account, that this tweet actually occurred in the thread. I went and looked late last night. I actually couldn't find this thread. So we're not certain if this is accurate, if this is real. And then, of course, confirm the name of this person. So confirming who this is, that this conversation actually happened, and that this person is related to that study is really important in order to support the claim that, supposedly one of the researchers confirmed that if this scenario was true, then it would be considered biased. And now we've made it to the end of this one particular argument chain. And so...
Whoa, you made it through the whole demo? Jamie, you must have talked way too fast. Hopefully everyone knew what you were talking about. Anyway, thanks for making it to the end, everyone. Bye.
So, argument mapping, debate mapping is incredibly intricate and meticulous, and it's a ton of work. And I do recognize that, we don't have any expectation that people are going to want to crawl through all of this. Maybe the people who love getting lost in, wiki rabbit holes are the type of people who would love to crawl through a debate map like this. So our actual visual layout is much more simple. People can unpack if they want to learn more, but the logic is more abbreviated and streamlined and meant just to take people through on a tour so they can experience the diversity of ideas and points of view that are available to them when you're exploring certain questions regarding a certain social problem. And that can be exploring argumentation about the problem or the solution. Now, I don't know if I have time to talk more about methodology and what that looks like. The name of the talk was Argument Change, so I just wanted to walk you through one of those. And I think I'm out of time.
You have a lot of questions, I think. Perhaps we can take one from Quion, and you can maybe pack a few of the things that you were going to show into the answer.
Yes.
I'm going to unmute Quion.
Hey, Jamie, great to see you, and great to see the demo of what you've been working on. I'm so excited. Anyway, first question is, there are certain things that kind of just explode the space. So, for instance, with your discussions of whether it was of the various biases that might have crept into that Stanford study, you come up with the question of, well, what does it even mean to have a random sample of a population? And so I'm wondering, first question, how do you handle or curtail these larger and larger meta questions from complicating things? And then the second question is, I noticed that, forgive me if you covered this and I missed it, in a lot of these things you had these percentages, like percentage verified or percentage true or percentage important. And what I'm wondering is, does that mean that there's some way to automatically chain through these things to a leaf node and assign an overall importance or truth value to it?
An antiquated feature of this tool. It's not something that we'll likely implement anytime soon. Also, I think those in-depth questions about what it means to have a non-random sample and what it means to identify what a person actually is, like all these deep, scientific or even philosophical questions are important to map. And those are some of the debates I'm really interested in getting into. We kind of have to just swim around in the shallows for now until we have more significant resources to dive deep. But it all depends on whether or not we're finding those arguments actually applying to those specific subjects that we're covering at the time. Given all the resources in the world, we dive into those questions immediately, but it's just what happens to already be discussed on the periphery of those specific topics. But the goal is to, much like that little robot video mock-up I made quickly, there is a goal to take people on a tour. Have different ways of walking people through leaf nodes just to expose them to a diversity of ideas and make sure that they're considering various caveats and nuances.
And
also,
awesome. Great. Is there any other question? Anyone? Do you want to raise your hand? I mean, I'm sure that there's a ton of different questions, but those are probably quite hard to get to in 2 minutes or so. But maybe people can sit on it, and we'll get back to it after. Oh, Deka has a question. I'm going to unmute you. Good morning, or good night.
There we go. Thanks. That was interesting. So we actually built something kind of like this over this past semester when I was teaching AI ethics and studying information disorder in the COVID space. So I'm fascinated to see it. One of the issues that we ran into was the difficulty of locating relevant nodes. As the number of nodes explodes, it starts getting harder and harder to figure out what depends on what. And the particular map you're working with is tree structured. I don't know if you actually, so the first question is, did you allow non-tree structured argument chains? And the second one is, if you did allow that, or even if you didn't, how do you allow a user to even find all of the relevant nodes to a particular argument chain when it's when there's like 500 or 1,000 nodes in it already?
This appears like a tree structure, but it's actually deceptively a tree structure. So we can actually link nodes. And so what it looks like is, that pyramid tree structure, but like the actual data structure, it's all like swirled and connected together. We made it easy on ourselves to connect those, so it visually doesn't appear that way. We're going to visualize it in a different way for the front end for public use. So it's not really a tree. We can connect various nodes and articulate nodes to be expressed slightly differently in order to be more relevant. So the same basic meaning of a claim can be relevant to a different argument, but there may be a caveat that's necessary in order to establish the relationship between that and like a slightly different claim of a different subtopic. And so linking those together through alternate phrasings, which I showed, is how we deal with that. Your other question, so we can actually search our debate map. If you have 500 relevant claims, you would just unpack those 500 relevant claims. If you have a specific example about how like 500 relevant claims, is it like multiple degrees of difference away from the original claim that's being argued about?
It's more about what kinds of antecedents are needed to support the next step in your argument chain, right? And so if you have a non-tree structure where there are multiple antecedents for every conclusion or intermediate conclusion in your argument chain, it can start getting complicated to locate where the antecedent might be, especially because it gets stated in very, very different ways. They could get framed by natural language in very, very different ways. And when you have multiple authors working on it, and you've got more than 100 nodes, it starts getting really hard for people to identify even where to look.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about, and let me see if I've got this correct. Are you talking about when multiple people are actually inputting this into the debate structure? How could they effectively work together to locate things? Just to clarify,
that's one of the practical problems. But then also, even if you have just a single author, once you get past 500 or 1,000 nodes, even single authors have trouble remembering. This is long-standing knowledge engineering problem in good old-fashioned AI expert systems. You just can't wrap your head, or even a single author can't wrap their head around more than 1,000 nodes.
Yeah. So I kind of like breezed over very quickly the methodology, but before we ever get to mapping. Like mapping should be one of the last things that we do. We do it in order to like just model the logic to see if we're like really considering all of the implied premises to establish that reasoning. So we do that to kind of check our own thinking. But as I mentioned before, when we extract claims and arguments, we start to categorize those. And so we just have like Excel spreadsheets of categories. And when we have a whole list of those claims and arguments, we start making subcategories of those categories. So we've kind of created this assembly line way of, okay, how can we piece these apart, start labeling them, and then connect those larger, broader, more abstract labels to kind of keep track of what's going on before we ever put it on a map. So we always kind of have this external reference to go back to, almost like a ledger of sorts of like what we have, how we've categorized it, how the categories may relate to different questions or points. So it's much more generalized than the map would be, but it's a way of keeping track and having one centralized source so people can, pull that language of those claims and arguments from. And it's not perfect, but, so
I mean, thank you so much. I think most of what we saw at the last one was also, I think you actually showed some of the spreadsheets at the previous deep dive, or at least like a screenshot of it or something. So it's really interesting to see the assembly line actually and to get a look behind the scenes. And thank you for that. I want to please share in the chat how people can get involved, how they can help the project, and so on and so forth. And I'm hoping that we actually get back to this after Mindey's presentation as well, and have like a little bit more free-floating discussion. Just in the interest of time, I think to give Mindey also the opportunity to have his presentation during the time of the salon. I would love to welcome you now and to kind of tell us a little bit about a little bit more about the Infinity project that you went to last time, and how it can actually help people in our Hivemind to collaborate more and maybe share the form as well. I can do that. I have it here.
Yes.
Welcome.
So hello everyone. Yeah. I will share this Mindey, and I will share the screen actually, and I'll start from asking like the why. Last time actually, if you had been to the sense making salon, I actually introduced the Infinity project's ideas and principles. So I will try to connect that with what we've got on the Hivemind here, and see how it could be helpful maybe. So on the Hivemind salons, we had discussed a variety of questions and ideas, and we had made the spreadsheets to connect that. So we've got transcripts, other AI, and we've got the questions and answers. In fact, if you look at that a little bit structurally, we had 3 or more actually now weeks, and in each week we had separate questions, and we had documents, Google Docs connected. On each document we listed a lot of additional questions and categories, and with potential actionable paths to action. So question. So how is this going? Like we had already covered the questions and answers essentially, but we had also said to ourselves to get them converted into concrete actions. How is this going? Like after these salons, how is this going to happen? Is up for us. For some it may decide to perform market operations to restructure their portfolios as a result of these discussions. Some may write scientific papers, some technical reports and political recommendations. Others may start new projects and companies, and in all likelihood, what will be is that in the end, all of us are going to focus on what we had been focusing for the past years and decades, aiming at the long shots for the future. So these projects that we already have and we're already working on, we're invested into. So I had introduced this Infinity project, which tries to actually map to capture, what the connections between the questions, answers, and actions. So we've got basically just three major sections, which is like categories, questions, and ideas or inventions and projects or companies. And once you actually, you can actually come and discuss about that here. And once you do discuss that and write new input new companies or new projects, you're actually contributing to building a kind of hierarchy, or where each project is in blue, or each idea here is in brown, and each question or category is in green. So basically, you can see which categories are actually have projects, or actually which ideas are being worked on and which are not, and kind of have a that kind of view. So what I would like to invite you to do is go to this page and fill out this form. Basically, just fill out what you had, at a company or project to describe that you're recently focusing on. So go to 000.li/plus project, and the company name or mission. The website can add multiple categories that this project or company belongs to, and comma separate a few tags, extra tags if there are, at the description, and if you have some additional information about the business details, so that we can actually have include the projects, all the projects that you're working on, into the graph. Here, registration is not required, but actually, if you're interested, you can go ahead and also create a user on this site. So it doesn't require any private personal information. Even you don't need an email. So you can topics are ordered by the recency of interaction. So if someone has voted or commented on that on a topic, the topic comes to the top for community's attention. So if you click here, one important part is this is like the CSV here, the link. If you click on that, you actually open the Airtables, which are connected to match the database relationships exactly as in the project original database. It's just a copy of all the content that automatically is made whenever people add contributions. So you can see the tables are like categories, inventions, companies, tools, people, results, products, orders, trades, messages, users, languages, units, currencies, accounts, markets, and there's also even a calendar for meetings. So these are not random tables. In fact, they come from our ontological investigation. So let me actually try to explain that. So, at WeFindX Foundation, we really hold the mathematical equation model dear to our heart. And here is the how you can think of it. So yes, for example, F, you can think of the world as or the world's current state or as F, and the dream or desired kind of state as Y. And you can think of that there is, of course, a distance between what we have and what we want. And we can think of ourselves as this agent or processes that converge towards, like they're trying to minimize the distance between what we've got and what we want, right? So This can be concisely expressed in the the equation fx equals y, and we can think of ourselves essentially as an intelligence, because we are optimizers that are trying to minimize this quantity. So one basic question that you could ask is that, what do we need to know about the world to make sense of the world? And our answer is just that we just need the data to fill out these three components, f, x, and y, to answer what does what. So our answer at the high level is that all you need is just to know entities, processes, and conditions. But we can expand that. In fact, if you had been to the previous salon that had discussed the infinity, we've had extracted 7 kind of categories or questions, which is who, where, when, does, what, why, and how. So essentially, the left side, the who, what, where, when, actually is descriptive of the world, what we've got in the world, and on the right side, it's such our mind space. So all the propositions, all the go to that imaginary space that is descriptive of our dream, and doing is not really a question. It's just it's just there, right? So it's a process. It's describing what's happening. So so what data can answer these questions now? All of these 7. First, well, we can try to explain what we mean by these. If you look here, there is assets, places, events. Answer these questions about who, where, or what, when, and goals, ideas, and plans. Answer these other questions: why, how, and what. And so, if you look, one way to explain that is through synonyms. For example, you have the things that answer the question why, or the goals. It's the intents, categories, concepts, purposes, problems, or questions. All of them share the quality of being able to answer the question kind of about the intents. Similarly, the ideas, the synonyms are like rationales, principles, transformations, methods, algorithms, functions, and so on. Basic answers, just like ideas are to goals, just like answers are to questions. And so similarly, the plans or projects are answering the question what, doing what, and so on. So I will not go through everyone, but first 5 tables come from this. So they are the tables: tools, people, questions, inventions, and projects. And then there is the rest of 4 tables there, coming from so people work on projects, and they are resulting in results like demos, works and tasks, and once they mature, they become products and services and utilities, which is a products table, and then orders, trades, and the matching of the orders being trades. And so these are the rest of next 4 of the tables. So what we're doing here actually is building a world's model where that answer those basic questions. Through answering those basic questions, helping us to fill out the equation, and we're working on importing data to fill the knowledge gaps. And what the data, so what are the sources and numbers. So basically, for example, if you look through what answers the question why or goals, you will find that there are lots of like legislature documents, maybe 100 million or more in all of the countries that are describing the expected human behaviors in those societies, and in that way they are specifying the conditions or the goals. And you can find technology, scientific visions, and international treaties, all kind of NGOs and NPOs are missions. They are describing goals and so on. So their organizational policies, national policies, documents about that are describing goals and so on. So so those are various sources like LexisNexis there is, but a lot of them are publicly available in like through governments publishing their law. And regarding ideas, it's much more interesting. For example, you might think that tariff number is not an idea, but really like HS code or harmonized code is actually describing a product class, and a product class like a cucumber or whatever, a computer, is actually an idea behind, like it's a description of an idea behind the product. So it's a source of ideas. All the product category codes are essentially references to ideas of products that exist. Now, industry category codes, economic activity codes, patent numbers, so 100 million, for example, in Google patents or more, and then scientific publications, Google Scholar, ResearchGate, and so on, Scopus, and so such various sources now. Protocol, for example, laboratory and medical protocols are in Protocol Online, right? That there are other sources as well. So innovative brainstorming ideas are on Half Bakery, maybe 50,000. Code repositories store the ideas about execution of about the possible things you can run on computer, right? So and standards, the Certipedia, for example, has all kind of a compendium of all kind of industry standards, and again, units are also ideas, essentially theorems, mathematical theorem indices too. So these are ideas which are the difference between a project and idea is that well, a project is idea plus resources. You know, it's so now there's these are just a few examples of sources. You can take a look at all other sources. There's really some, so like 300 million, around 300 million companies in the world that we're trying to import, and there's if you think about all the places, so there are like the real places and virtual places. So the real places probably you could include all the stars in the universe and much more. But for the virtual places, maybe you would like to include all the neurons and the memory addresses and so on. So so whatever is addressable, we're trying to kind of put that under the the where category, and the time or events, time dimension is in fact everywhere. So you will find them in all databases, pretty much almost all. So when you look at what answers the questions about the the processes, well, so there's operations, right? And all kind of operations, so lab operations, medical operations, money or transfer operations, information transfer operations, like Slack, for example, stores, well, messages, telegram messages, but GDELT, for example, is public indices. The blogs are public, right? Sources of public communication. Then asset transfers or shipments are so marine traffic, flight radar, Panjiva, S&P Global too. So there's lots, postal offices, customs, they store the information about the asset transfers, right? So network request operations like telcos and ISPs, right? So we've got really good solutions for sort of like indexing them, like Elasticsearch, right? But then we only have 2 dimensions usually, where and when. We're thinking about extending the indexing of like solutions like Elasticsearch for it, with essentially 7 or six of those dimensions to answer all the questions, not just a few of them. Then regarding operations, you see the money. Each organization produces like a manufacturer produces product, so you can think of org product as a organization product release operation. So, for example, ERP software usually has these stock changes, how much in stock has and how much produced and so on. So these are manufacturing or product operations. UI movement operations, there's lots of sources to capture the user interface. So Mixpanel, Google Analytics, and Intercom, and so on. So CPU floating point or CPU operations like Process Explorer and others. So the computer hardware monitoring, the software allows to monitor them, right? And again, organization tasks are also a kind of operations like Asana, Trello, Jira captures, and other project management systems capture them. And now MetaQuotes and TradingView, Amazon, Oanda, and so on. So the trade operations and web deployments themselves are operations like CircleCI, Travis CI, and so on. So allowing to capture the deployment operations. And actually there must be much more. What we're trying to, and here's a little bit. So we've got in these all kind of different systems, we've got data and we've got just a few tables. At the bottom there, extracted maybe approximately 15 tables are needed to align all those data sources into kind of one, which we're trying to build like a transcultural interlingual Wikipedia for action, and with data and operations services from all the sources like the mentioned above. Jimmy Wales from Wikipedia said, imagine a world in which every person on the planet is given free access to the sum of all human knowledge. We think that, well, knowledge is not enough. We need also access to the actions through the APIs of those all systems. So thinking, so that's why, well, building a Wikipedia for action of a sort. So yeah, to reduce that distance from what we've got and what we want. Yep. So I think hopefully this is
thank you.
Not too long, right?
No, perfect.
And welcome to register and chat with us together. Add projects. There's also you just click the login or join, and there's also the /meet where if you want to keep up with us, there is a Telegram channel as well as the Discord channel where all the newly published topics also are shared automatically. So yeah, looking
Thank
forward
you so
to
much.
cooperation that we could have.
Thank you, Mindey. So. Wow, that's a wild ride. I had no idea.
Yeah,
wow,
this data is there. It's just
siloed. Yeah,
needed to make sense. In fact, one of the hopes was every person there's about approximately like 7 or 8 units of real-time like memory or short-term memory that humans have. And I was thinking, how can we make it so simple that even for a kid, you could explain how the world works or how the society works, reverse engineering the society, and have it interactive, so we can actually collaborate through it. So.
Very nice. And of course, the reverse engineer is the first step, and then re-engineer it is your second step.
Yes.
Very subversive. We're just trying to reverse engineer, guys. Okay, so let's see. We are now at 58. I guess I would love to kind of like have some context from Jamie and Mindey, just in the ways that you wish that participants interact with your project. And, you know, I think for Mindey, that maybe has two answers for you. One is the specific Hivemind chapter that you opened for us, which I really thank you very much for. And then the second is generally, how to interact with Infinity. I just want to kind of like keep that fresh in people's minds before we launch into an optional Q&A and sharing. So Mindey, maybe do you want to start?
Yes. You mean what people should? So
what do you wish? Like what do you currently like? What's the state of the general Infinity project? Yeah, and how can people plug in?
Yes, well, currently the major way how people collaborate or kind of use it. So basically, just come to the page to read the ideas that people have, as well as the questions and chime in. Basically, if you can open any idea and add a comment. Click on the comment, and that's fine. But you do that only when if you I don't know if you are familiar with Half Bakery, for example, but the idea but basically people come only when they have something on their mind, like a new idea that you want to share, and since our whatever is published here, it automatically is shared with the chat channels. People come back to the page to comment. So basically, you can go and describe, for example, an idea and connect it with some, for example, a category, and actually just publish it. And yeah, so that's the main, I think, way. The site does not have JavaScript, and it's actually does not require your identity. So basically, you can be playful. You kind of could just whatever it's not usual these days that you would just be kind of semi-anonymous, but you can be here semi-anonymous. You don't have to, you just can create a user and chime in whatever is on
thank you.
Mind. Yeah,
that's fantastic. Okay, very, very cool. Jamie, do you want to talk to participants as well in ways in which they can get involved with it?
Sure. Okay. So the Society Library being a nonprofit, there are two ways that people can participate. Well, that they can actively participate. You can always be donors or whatever. If you're a volunteer, we've essentially created an assembly line pipeline for how we digest content. So helping with archival, transcription, or even extraction. I'm going to quickly share my video or screen. Because something I was hoping to get across when I was showing that argument chain is how absolutely complex conversation and argumentation can actually get about social problems. So this is the Plandemic transcript, and these are all the claims and arguments that we extracted from it. I believe there was 455 implied and derived claims that we extracted from that transcript. And that's because human language is so unbelievably complex, and we imply so much when we're making our arguments. So we could use all the help in the world in extracting that content. We have a 3-week program where we teach people logic and argumentation. The ultimate goal, of course, is to create a visualization simulating what it would look like if everyone from all points of view surrounded by these questions in these topics had all of the arguments and evidence available to them so that they could present their case. So our goal is really to create visualizations of that. We have a front end, but it doesn't have all the same features we wanted to turn on. Was my video not started, Allison? I just got a notification for it. Okay.
No, it wasn't,
anyway.
but it's fine. We can hear you.
Okay. The goal of the project is to create visualizations which simulate what could it look like if we could communicate at a societal scale. We can with social media, but it's not well organized. And so if you want to participate in helping derive claims and arguments from media, whether it's transcriptions of television or video or scholarly articles, we teach you how to actually work through that process. Now that Allison's enabled my screen, I'll show you. It's a pretty meticulous process of just deriving meaning. And this is done redundantly in order to preserve the integrity of all of it. But essentially you can participate by being a volunteer to either help archive, transcribe, do research, extract argumentation. Our mapping feature is locked down. Only a few people really map. Or you can just wait around for when we actually present the integrated conversation, and then you can browse that content. The goal being that we can create different abbreviations of that content. So if you want to fully explore all the articulated arguments, you can do that through something as that provides a deep dive like the debate map, or you can also watch videos that just kind of walk you through very general assumptions. So the idea is just to get everyone on the same page, be exposed to that diversity of ideas, and given the tools and opportunity to do deep dives if you want to. So you can either wait to watch, or we can train you and you can help us out.
Oh, okay, that's glorious. Thank you both so much. Yes, of course.
Additional possible things you could, if you are interested in some specific data, we're in active research of data sets as well as the ontology itself. It's still a subject of further research of how it's better to make it clear for this kind of knowledge essentially structure. So if you're interested, you can join us every week on that. We will have the discussion of what's out there and what new categories we should add, and basically modifying that whole big picture graph.
All right, thank you, Mindey. I think for both of you, I would love to. I think, but we would be opening up another kind of another box of Pandora. But for example, Jamie, I remember when you did this on climate, right? Last year when we met, and that problem won't go away. I'm hoping that you're retaining all the arguments and everything that you build up for that. And from Mindey, I would also love to know kind of like what are your pet peeve problems that you really want to apply your methodology to, maybe. And we're now 6 minutes over time. So if anyone of you has to hop off, feel free to do so. I'm officially closing it out. This is just to kick off participant sharing and Q&A for those who would like to stay on. But this is definitely now the finish of the official salon. But I would love to know kind of like what are the what are the main problems that you want to tackle with this? Maybe Jamie, you want to go first, and then Mindey.
Uh-huh. So I'm actually extremely excited to get back to climate change. We've done so much work in articulating the 220 subtopics, and I don't doubt that there are more. And like I mentioned, 5 of the 6 fundamental questions, which means like these fundamental unresolved questions that all of these other arguments are pointing towards, are about articulating the problem, but one is about a potential solution, and that just encapsulates some of the majority of subtopics I think that we found. And so I'm really anxious to get back to that. But the Society Library in general is committed to mapping high impact, persistent, and polarizing social and political issues, with the long-term dream of, maybe one day human generations will grow up with a digital library so that they can start encountering different points of view and perspectives about hot button issues without instead just being haphazardly socialized depending upon where they live or who their parents are, or what kind of education that they have. So we're just going to tackle subject by subject, and then upkeep the topics as much as we can, automate as often as we can, and just continue to grow this fully articulated library that's organized in a way to simulate conversation. So really getting to designed to get to a point of understanding about where everyone is coming at in addressing these particular problems. And then, of course, I mentioned there's several other projects that our fundamental understanding of language and how people argue is going to contribute to, like governance and decision-making projects. All of this is rooted in, okay, well, if we're going to talk about decision-making, if we're going to talk about governance, we really need to understand how people are arguing about social and political issues right now, which is why instead of, creating a structure and asking people to get on a platform to argue, instead we're just finding all these arguments where they already are and modeling them in an integrated way.
Yes. Well, in my case, in our case, is essentially where we would like to apply this is in helping humanity collaboratively define and pursue goals, because even the AI safety is undefined without knowing what our goal is. So, in order to arrive at this answer to what our goal is now, there are many ways. Right. One is just make the free markets, and free market will answer what people really want. But if we look back at the equation model and how we can structurally try to build that answer to fill in the equations parameters, we actually can realize that there are answers in let's say legal systems. There are answers in moral systems and so on. So and there exists already. This other approach is, for example, inference of intent from the. Just like you can infer the subject, object, verb from the, let's say, analyzing a sentence as a sequence of letters using the grammars or context-free grammars, so you can also try to, of course, observe the people's specific operations or actions that they are performing in the society. The middle part, which is the yellow part, where you observe each trade, each message transfer and so on, and try to infer what is it that people really expressing through these operations that they are doing, each money transfer, each shipment, every so these are you could try to actually parse the not just the sentence into these syntactic and semantic elements, but parse the action sequences that we observe in the society into to infer the intent that people in the society are expressing, and from there to figure out what actually is it that the society wants. So that seems like a thing that is potentially reachable, but I think that today it is not so close to our reach because of lack of the integrated view data. And I think probably the closest are the intelligence agencies and intelligence communities to having that data, but it seems that to reflect really on ourselves, we need a core of that, not all, but really some core of that much broader than currently available, would be available, much like Wikipedia is available for everyone to reflect upon. And that's what one of the, and that would have direct implications to the AI safety questions, because yeah, as going back to the argument that we don't have, if we don't even know what we want, how can we define a safety? Because you define safety with respect to how one or other type of action will reduce the distance to that other point. If you don't have that other point, you don't even no, right?
Yeah. Oh man, there's so much to uncover.
Even risk is defined like that.
I am personally more skeptical, I guess, that we can do something like a coherent extrapolated volition. But I think without wanting to go into the AI safety, I think back, because I think we may be losing the folks that came here for the project. Adele had a comment. I'm going to unmute you if you don't mind.
Forgot what I was going to say. That's embarrassing.
Well, you had two amazing comments that were in the chat.
Oh, for Mindey?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, my question was if like you can, like, it would help if you could describe certain ideas that were piped through the system, because you've given a lot of thought. There's no denying that you've given this. So, like, what I was interested in, if certain ideas have been piped through the system, and if those ideas were not yours. Because I mean, with your ideas, because you know how your system works, but it would be really useful to see somebody else coming in through the system and turning those ideas into something like a product or service.
So, yeah, actually, the way it works is that if you have a project right now, you add the project that you're working on, or a company that you're working on. The company automatically already has the products, and if it's part of, if we're starting to talk on it on the Infinity, there actually is a support for adding the products to this market there. And so the clear answer is that although this one of the major objectives of this system is to allow people to just write the idea and let others derive a project from that idea, and sort of like you would not, so you don't even have to work to make the idea get realized. Maybe other people are interested in working on it, and so you just share it, and you maybe and to get some royalties for that. But at this point, it's not we had not had the level of maturity that you could already have some sales and company that was ab initio, actually started from there. So what I'm currently working on in particular is working on the companies in the stock markets, and trying to figure out what tools they're using internally to derive the value. Because if you look at the core site, it's actually seems like the essential, like it may capture most interesting know-how in the society that's available. Because the number of companies that are listed in the stock markets in the world is probably about 60,000 only, and all of them are big companies that are relevant to people. So we plan to import all of those companies that are listed in the stock markets into the system, and then map out the tools or machines that the companies use, as well as products that they produce. So and people that are working in those companies. So sort of like having that part of it's very relatively small. In the whole world, there's around maybe 200 million more companies or more companies. So if you just take that small amount, like 60,000 that are listed in the stock market, and figure out what tools or instruments they have, and what some instruments are going to be not really instruments but suppliers maybe. It's a supplier is a machine for the machine. and really capturing really important part of the society's know-how, from which everyone could learn, because it's really not hard to start a new product, even hardware product, if you know the tools. So that's the focus right now, sort of.
Thank you. Adil, can I put you on the spot again? And you had two fantastic questions for Jamie as well. I'd love to hear them too.
Oh, I totally forget that question. Sorry.
I can channel you and ask them.
Right. I've been talking to Jamie on Slack, so I've been bothering her there.
Okay. Well, maybe they're useful for others too. One is, if truth tables can indeed be created, then we should get global leaders to commit to certain outputs, which was, I think, an interesting one. More like treating them as an incentive market, and treating this. Yeah.
So like going back to the debate about climate change, it seems like the values drive the overall narrative, and that could be quite bad in the future, because if there's like a lot of groupthink and say whenever climate change happened, I haven't looked at the data. I'm not a climate scientist, but like there should be like, we all have to chip in, the way I see it, to support whatever set of actions we need to take. But if like 60 to 70% of the population is not, it doesn't even believe it's true, then it's not fair for the other 30%. So I think at least, even if the decisions were locked, it would be really useful to have that in a future set for climate change and a whole host of other issues. So like if we kind of rewind back, we could say, look, there's something not working with these frameworks, and we've got to at least talk about this. If that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is what I'll say. When we were mapping all of the climate change conversations, right, we called it the Great American Debate, because we were focusing specifically on American arguments, English language in the American territory. And so the various different plans that people have suggested from international treaties, from different groups that were putting forth, like, these are the plans, these are the outcomes that need to occur, and these are the actions that we can take in order to achieve those outcomes. I can just say that there is an immense complexity in arguing whether or not those claims that were made in these plans are true. And our role is simply to articulate those. Because there may be some worthwhile argument being made about how someone is making an abbreviation in their logic, and they're jumping, saying, if we take this action, this is most meaningful. But over time, when we've done this again and again, and I mentioned categories, what we notice is that arguments tend to fall in certain categories, and we tend to talk about things again and again. So I think what's really useful about what we're doing in debate mapping is that we start to see what are the useful questions that we could be asking when we're probing whether or not something is true, if it is convenient, if it is actually impactful, if it's feasible to accomplish, what is the cost. And so articulating this is just so we can take all of those claims and begin to ask questions. Now, I don't know how the Great American Debate Society Library would ever go about, holding any type of world leader accountable. But what we can do, especially over time, is start seeing how have claims that have been made eventually panned out to be true or false, right? With the benefit of hindsight, we can argue whether or not something is true. Proving anything true is insanely difficult. I tend to believe it may be almost impossible. But when it comes to thresholds of truth, the furthest I've gotten in considering something like that is potentially creating some sort of model for likelihood of being proven true. And for that, looking back in time and saying, okay, well, what has come to pass? What type of evidence, what type of observations, how much corroboration of that data did there need to be before it to be considered something that was true? So we haven't begun scratching the surface of that yet, because we're still in that initial phase of just let's understand how people argue, how people unpack and challenge claims, how people try to prove things are true or try to prove things are false. But down the line, and this is getting to what you asked about, Mike, which is the Society Library Governance Project. So the work that we're doing now in mapping these conversations and ripping apart claims and turning every claim into a question, finding answers to that, categorizing it so we can create containers and keep track of it. The gentleman, I forget your name, who mentioned 500 relevance claims. I wasn't sure if that was hyperbolic, but when I was thinking about it afterwards, and something else to note about our methodology is that we literally break every single argument into every single implicit and implied claim. So that's the reason why we were able to pull 55 claims from a 26-minute video is because we rip out all the implications. Now, when we actually map it, like in the demo that I showed you, we reconstruct that so that there's not an enormous amount of relevance claims because you're picking apart every element of those arguments. Instead, we put the arguments back together once the structure begins to emerge because we see layers and layers of categories. So anyway, we're thinking about potentially maybe there should be some model for likelihood of being proven true, so that when we exhaustively articulate all of these arguments about what is wrong or what problems are, we can crowdsource solutions and see which solutions can address, established through reason, the arguments that articulate issues in like an Occam's razor type way. So what solutions can solve problems given that we've exhaustively mapped the arguments about whether it's cost effective, feasible, convenient, if it's impactful, etc. And then the Internet Government, which is, I'm told, a terrible name, is the Society Library Governance Project, where essentially we ask the question, why should democracy necessarily be a system of representation of individuals? Could it be a system of representation of all individuals' ideas? Because you don't necessarily need everyone participating in a vote for everyone to have representation if, one person is arguing on behalf of an entire group of people. And so the goal of that project is let's have democratic representation of a population by collecting all of their ideas. So arguments about certain vulnerable populations, arguments about, that one person who is particularly impacted by a specific policy. And everyone in a way would have equal representation in that one argument being made on behalf of one group. You wouldn't need to have a large enough majority of people in order to have that voice heard. That is an argument in a map that is placed wherever it's relevant in arguing about, a certain value or a certain law being passed, etc. So that next step of the work that we're doing is let's model conversations around articulating problems and identifying solutions, and then eventually talk about, okay, how can we model the conversation so we can start generating solutions to solve problems without steamrolling over value conflicts? Because essentially what a lot of these debates come down to is, besides what Creon kind of got to, which is like these philosophical and definition based in like physics, like on like epistemological ends, besides the debates ending there, a lot of where there is a clash of argumentations when we're talking about values and morals, where it's kind of difficult to prove what's right or wrong. You can create metrics for what, if you're talking about it's more right to not inflict upon a majority or something like that. But again, that's just a claim being made about what's potentially right or wrong. So the idea of the Internet Government is crowdsource all of these, map them out, see which solutions people argue can actually solve problems, defend themselves against arguments about whether it's feasible and whatever. Go through a cycle enough times until one solution or a cluster of solutions in a policy package would address all of those issues. Anyone who participated in either contributing information or helping to extract and label information would get a veto vote. So, if it ended up being that the ultimate solution to this particular problem was, robots kill all humans, anyone participating can veto that. And that would be the decision-making mechanism for how something would be considered passed. As we're thinking now, again, we're doing all of this work just to kind of really get a grasp on people's language and argumentation so that we can actually effectively try to model this, right? Create a mock Congress, not relying on people's ability to articulate their ideas, but instead just taking the ideas that everyone's articulating and modeling that Congress of, debate about what could be a good policy to solve a specific problem without steamrolling a value. So
that would be interesting. I think one thing that could be cool is if you just run sentiment analysis over the argument chains, and that you could do that like super easily. I once did that. I ran it over my dissertation to prove a point about how well that already worked to figure out whether someone was pro or against something. So I just ran it over my dissertation, and it kind of really showed where I was making a positive or negative argument, which was really interesting because it's intermixing your endorsement and the person's sentiment about it. And then I was going to say for the democracy project, I think we had a experiment here once at the embassy where I live about, I think it was before my time, but I think the house was run for a week or for a month or something on like a Wikipedia democracy where there were always like a few people that had to familiarize themselves with all of Wikipedia about a certain issue and then make a decision based on that. amongst many government experiments that we had here, I think, which was time demanding, but I think it worked okay. I also want to plug that it sounded like what you're saying was a little bit like, I guess, well, I mean, on the outskirts, a little bit like future key, right? Like slightly, at least, right? Like Robin Hansen's concept of like vote values but bad beliefs. So to try to disentangle them a little bit, which is really quite hard to do. And I'm going to post a little bit more. Maybe I think Ralph Merkel followed up on that actually with the DAO democracy recently, with a paper on that. So I'm currently trying to find it and post it here. So those are, I think, interesting kind of like prototypes and trying to connect actuators and then trying to connect kind of like decision making to the sense making. And of course, I think the one that Anthony presented here, Metaculous, ideally decision makers would just listen to projects like that much more, and they're definitely doing a pandemic focused one as well. Okay, so those are just like, I guess, like another laundry list of sense making projects. I think it would be awesome if there was like an integration amongst those different models, because I think they could inform each other in really nice ways in many cases. Okay, do you have any last words? We're now on 1 minute until the end, and then I'll close it out.
I'll just say thanks so much for like hanging out and listening. Hopefully my rambles made sense, and if you have any questions, I'm happy to like explain off this chat. If we're a nonprofit, we'd love for you to get involved. Thanks.
Yeah, we also would love you to get involved into this world model building process as well. And probably one thing that I wanted to emphasize is that tools and machines are so important. In fact, if you look even at the COVID-19, we're talking so much, but someone has a machine in the factory that is printing masks, and having the tool is actually can be much more important than having just the information floating. If you have an axe, for example, or you are in the woods, right? So and someone does not have an axe, is unable to cut the trees that will separate them. In order to make an axe, you need to mine the metals, to do a lot of heavy lifting. And if someone has already the tool, the machine, it's liberating. So in our economic essential manufacturing base is super important for us all.
Thank you so much. Awesome. I'm just posting information for tomorrow's salon. Tomorrow we have a salon at 6 p.m. and that will be with Daniel Schmachtenberger, who will be here for Q&A. I have a few questions prepared. I'm sure that a lot of you have a lot of questions as well, so I encourage you to come, and maybe we can collect them in the chat already beforehand, so to make time and to make sure that your questions are being heard as well. I'm super excited for you guys' project. Please fill out the form that Mindey shared as well, if you want your project to be included in the Hivemind collaboration graph. Thank you guys so much for coming on. I'm like so happy we did this after last week, because last week we felt like we just we were like almost getting it, in the presentations, and we flipped them. And so I'm just really happy that we took the time to actually do a deep dive into this. And I think people are quite surprised by how much actually meat to the bones there is. It's like, I had no idea that both of your projects are already so advanced. So it was super cool to see you. Thank you so much for joining and showing, and I'm hoping that people get involved. And I think, Dekai just wrote me privately that he would like to stay in touch with you. And this was probably mentioned for the group to both of you. And Dekai, I would say get on Slack, because that's where you can find them. If you can't, then I'll make an introduction, because I think actually like the collaboration between Dekai and Jamie, I could totally see that, because Dekai can produce much of the heavy AI whopping and lifting, and has been a natural an NLP well, God would be said too much. I'm going to stop talking here now, but I think that would be a really cool connection to make. Anyway, I hope you have a lovely day. I'm hoping to see many of you tomorrow at 6 p.m. And in the meantime, maybe meet you on Slack. Bye. Bye, guys. Thank you so much, Paul, for co-hosting and managing the ship.